Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Tikiyaki TV. I'm your host, Jim Baki, and we're going to be talking about some more Exotica today. Probably the most obvious choice, but I think I would be doing anybody that watches this channel or listens to Tikiyaki Orchestra or is into Tiki, it would be a huge disservice to not talk about this record today, because it is the record that started off the genre of Exotica, and that is, of course, this record right here. Of course, Exotica, the sounds of Martin Denny, Exotica. And interesting record, because there are two versions of this record. Here are the two different ones here. One is in mono, one is in stereo. The original version, of course, coming in mono, and interestingly re-recorded with different people, some different people for the stereo version. So, as you know, this is the song that kind of, the album that started things off for Martin Denny. It's his first record, also gave birth to the genre that we now know as Exotica, and came out 1957, recorded December 1956, released May 1957. The original stereo version, the original band is the debut album, which was Martin Denny, Arthur Lyman on vibraphone, John Kramer on bass, and Augie Cologne on percussion. Oddly enough, this second version of the record, released probably a year or so later, re-recorded in stereo, and according to Martin Denny, stereo was becoming quickly very popular in the late 1950s, and Liberty Records thought that it would be a good idea to re-record the record in stereo because people wanted stereo. Stereo was very new, obviously, in the late 50s, and stereo records it was a big deal. I know that if you've ever looked into anything about Arthur Lyman, Arthur Lyman records were consistently being used in stereo stores as a way to exemplify the wonders of stereo, two different channels, and those records do have a lot of stereo on them, and they were recorded really well. So even some of them, one of them has a gatefold sleeve where they explain all the equipment they used and all of this stuff. Very interesting. Stereo was so new, so Liberty Records decided, well, we need to re-record this in stereo. Now, after the release of the debut, 1957 debut, Arthur Lyman left to go solo. He took John Kramer with him. So I guess they had to re-record it with different band members, though I think some of the recordings it's debated. Some of them are original recordings and added to. Some of them may be done with stereo trickery, which they did to some things back in the day. I don't really know the exact story on what it is, but what I do know is what I've read on some things like this. So the recording was recorded in one day in December 1956. I have two different reports here. One says it was recorded in 3 hours and 25 minutes, one session. But I've seen Martin Denny talk about it being recorded all in one day, which was an 8-hour session, and he added with overtime. They had to, I guess, convince the engineer to stay overtime and record it. So it was probably more like a 10-hour day. Of course, back then they recorded records all together in one studio. This one was recorded in Webley Edwards studio in Hawaii, and the subsequent stereo version was recorded in Hollywood. So different versions there. Martin Denny has always said that he prefers the original mono recording because it had that spark that they never seemed to be able to recapture. I think they're both good. And again, later on in 1959, they released Quiet Village, a stereo version on this album, Quiet Village. And this is when the song Quiet Village really blew up. and went, I think, top 10 in Billboard. And that's really what blew Martin Denny's career up, was that release, this release of Quiet Village in 1959. So that's the album, the song Quiet Village, and the Martin Denny group kind of came out, did pretty good, but then really blew up in 1959. Interesting, because that's the year that Hawaii became a state, and I think it opened up all sorts of interest in travel to Hawaii, because that song was so popular. It really did a lot for Hawaii tourism. I've seen that said before. But this record, it's a pretty amazing record. Now, five of these songs are written by Les Baxter, and they all appear on their Ritual of the Savage album from 1951. Quiet Village being one of the songs, but also Stone God, Jungle Flower, Love Dance, and Busy Port are all Les Baxter compositions. If you listen to the Les Baxter versions, they're obviously way different. There's orchestra and all of that kind of thing. The Denny versions are obviously stripped down. It's piano, vibraphone, Arthur Lyman on vibes, and Julius Wechter on the stereo version, bass and percussion. Though I did read somewhere that Harold Chang, who was later on, after Arthur Lyman left to form his own group, Harold Chang was the percussionist in Arthur Lyman's group for a really long time, the entire career of the group, I think. And it is, I've seen it said that he was playing on this record as well. He's not credited anywhere that I could see on here. And it makes sense, because some of the songs I listen to is like, there's a lot of percussion going on in these songs. I'm like, I know they didn't have overdubbing back then. They basically recorded all at once to 2-track, and that's it. But I could hear there's a lot going on these songs of percussion, so it makes sense. I thought, before I even read that, wherever I did read that, I thought, this sounds like there's extra people on this record. It can't just be the 4 guys. So, but they did all multitask as percussionists. Martin Denny had percussion on his piano. He would have different instruments up there. Arthur Lyman played a lot of percussion. And now, also, when I go back and listen to this record, you really hear that this is a very piano-dominated group. Because you think of Exotica music as vibraphone. Vibraphone's a very big key component in it. But in the Martin Denny group, it was more piano. And the vibraphones were more, they were there. Sometimes they took melodies. But it was very piano forward, this record. And I think that Arthur Lyman probably played a lot of percussion when he wasn't playing the vibraphone. And you could kind of see why he probably wanted to form his own group so he could play more vibes. And really the unsung hero on this record, and not necessarily so unsung, but is Augie Cologne, the percussionist, did all those amazing bird calls. The guy was an amazing percussionist. He really brought a lot to the group. And originally, when Martin Denny put the group together, it was a 3-piece. It was John Kramer, Arthur Lyman, and Martin Denny. And they started at Don the Beachcomber, and then Augie Cologne asked, hey, can I sit in? I play bongos. And I guess Martin really liked his energy and what he brought to the band, and he ended up joining the band and becoming part of the group for, 37 records Martin Denny put out. I'm not sure if Augie is on all of them, but he released 37 records as the Martin Denny group. So, yeah, Augie Cologne, super important part of this equation. Of course, he made solo records. I'm sure played with other people, but he was at the beginning with Denny, and that night with the frogs croaking in the pond, which is when they started doing the animal sounds. They were playing at the Hawaiian Village Hotel at the Tapa, not the Tapa Room, the Shell Bar, and there were some outdoor ponds, and the frogs started croaking. And one night they started imitating the frogs. I'm doing a whole history of Exotica video, at least how it got started. that will explain all of that stuff. I'll go into a little bit of it here, but not too much. I do know that, like I said, after Arthur Lyman left after this record and formed his own group, he ended up taking the residency spot at the Shell Bar, which I know Martin was not happy about, and apparently they didn't speak for a really long time until about 1990, when Martin Denny they got back together for the Exotica 90 CD, and the various members of the group came and got back together and did some recording for that record. But they had not spoken for many years, and then once they did, they were fine and friends again. Enough time had passed, which I find very interesting. But Martin was apparently not happy that Henry Kaiser from Hawaiian Village Hotel managed to coerce Lyman to split and form his own group and have them play in the Shell Bar. So really interesting history, a little bit of drama. But I know this is an obvious choice for a channel like this. If you're into Tiki, I'm sure you know this record. But if you don't, and you're into Tiki and you're into Tiki music and Exotica music, this is the record that started it all. So it is a absolute must, essential album. Again, the sounds of Martin Denny, Exotica, recorded 1956, released 1957, an absolute classic. And I'm going to be doing more on records like this. And again, I have a history of Exotica thing I'm working on, so look out for that. In the meanwhile, like and subscribe to this channel. I'm going to keep producing more content as often as I can. And thank you guys for watching. Again, if you have any questions or you want to have a subject you may want to hear talked about on the channel, you can email at tikiyakitv@gmail.com. Again, this is Jim Bakke. Thanks for listening, and aloha.